Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news. This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Carol Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, our next guest is a self-taught cook who you may know from Instagram, Shred Happens, where he has more than 4 million followers. It's there that he's documented his journey from being out of shape and unhealthy to losing over 100 pounds, which he attributes to cooking and eating healthy foods. Now he's got a food company and a cookbook. Arash Hashemi is a creator and the co-founder of Kaizen Food Company, which makes low-carb but high-protein rice and pasta. It's like I'm from New Jersey or something, which I am. Pasta. He's also the author of the new cookbook, Shred Happens. So easy, so good. He joins us here in the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. A beautiful book. Did I say your food company correctly?
Kaizen, yeah.
Kaizen.
Yeah.
I had a feeling not. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm good. Everybody always has a journey, I feel like, to get to something.
Yeah.
This is your first cookbook, your first book. Tell us a little bit about the journey and how you did get to this.
Yeah, well, I mean, the story starts from a young age. My parents immigrated to this country, and I was always focused on success and chasing a better life and making them proud. And so for the majority of my life, I was really professionally driven. And I was doing really, really great in the corporate world. But in late 2017, I just kind of looked at my wife, Madalena. I'd always struggled with my weight. And at one point, I was over 330 pounds. I was pre-diabetic.
Wow.
I had high cholesterol, high triglycerides. And
If you're listening on radio, you don't look like somebody who was 300 pounds.
Oh, thank you.
But anyway,
That
go
means a
ahead.
lot. Yeah, and so I knew I needed to do something to kind of change things up. Otherwise, this was going to get too late. And so I looked at my wife, Madalena, at the time, and we decided that I was going to leave my corporate career. It wasn't an easy transition, but we made certain sacrifices. We adjusted our lifestyle, and I set out to kind of change the direction of my life and refocus my relationship with food.
How were you able to do it, Arash? As Carol mentioned, everybody has different stories.
Yeah.
But you did it through cooking yourself, through eating differently.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about GLP-1s on the program and the business opportunity there and the way people are using them. But how specifically were you able to do this?
Yeah, look, I think similar to many Americans, I was eating the wrong foods in the wrong quantities. And over time, that just kind of, I couldn't outrun that. I always had a gym membership. I had personal trainers. But, you can very quickly, eat the 500 calories that you're going to burn with an hour at the gym. And so for me, I really needed to focus on making foods that I was actually excited about eating. I had tried every single diet out there, from Weight Watchers, Jenny Craig, The Zone, Atkins, you name it, I've tried them all. And, I think they're great for people, depending on whatever their circumstances are. For me, they felt a little bit more restrictive. I wasn't really excited about what I was eating.
You don't want to count points?
Hey, that could be useful
I'm
for
not
some
judging.
people. Yeah.
I'm not judging,
Yeah.
but
and I did for a while, and actually,
because it has worked for some people, right?
Absolutely. And fun fact, I was on Weight Watchers for a number of years, and I always remember, there was a 4 p.m. Weekly weigh-ins, and so starting Tuesday, I was always trying to figure out, all right, how do I game the system so I can actually, show a loss for the week, and so. But look, I think for me, it was really, all those diets, while they didn't work in many respects, they did work in the sense that they helped me understand what I needed. And for me I love food, and I wanted it to be an adventure. I wanted to be mentally stimulated as I was eating. I really enjoy the process of food. And so, I had to figure out how to do that for myself.
Well, I think what's interesting too is your book is so much like Mediterranean food.
Yeah.
And was that because that's what kind of got you to a healthier place, a better weight, just a better kind of relationship and existence with food?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was, I'm Persian, and so we use a lot of spices in our home cooking and in our culture, and so those played a huge part in adding flavor to the different types of meals that I was making for myself. We use a lot of fresh herbs that add just a burst of flavor in every bite. Whether that's fresh mint, dill, parsley, tarragon, and so I started kind of experimenting with those things. And the great thing is they also don't have a lot of calories, and so. I was adding a ton of those to my meals. I was using a lot of citrus, and I was able to get a lot of flavor out of those very simple changes. And that got me excited about eating. It was more calorically friendly, and kind of started from there.
Did you have to be really precise about measuring out ingredients, counting calories, and really, or could you be more? Could you be less formal about it? Could you be more relaxed about it?
I'm much more relaxed now, but at the beginning, yeah, I absolutely had to take inventory of what I was eating. And one of the first things that I did was actually I started just documenting what I was eating just on a sheet of paper at the time, because I didn't really realize how many times throughout the day I was actually reaching for something. And for me, those little nibbles, those little bites, licks, the snacking really caught up to me. And that was really an opportunity in of itself for me. I was cutting out about 500 calories a day just by kind of monitoring that. Or if I knew that I had to actually, write something down, it gave me a second to kind of just pause and question, do I really want to be eating this right now? Is this the right choice? And that helped me be much more mindful, because before that, I was just eating without really any sort of, concern for the ramifications or the consequences.
How does physical activity play a part in your journey?
For me, it's played a role. I'd say the bigger thing for me has been changing the dynamic with food and eating foods that keep me satiated, keep me full, deliver a ton of protein with the right levels of fiber to kind of keep me going throughout the day. One of the bigger things that I set out to do at the beginning of my journey was, I didn't really know how to swim or run really a mile, but, I said, hey, I'm going to do a half Ironman and train for a triathlon. And so, that was an interesting process. And so I actually ran in 2 half marathons. I completed I ran in 2 half marathons, completed 2 half triathlons or half Ironmans, and then did a full marathon as well. But for me, the bigger opportunity was really around food, because, as they say, you really can't outrun a bad diet. And that's where I really struggled previously.
How did you think about, I think there are a ton of cookbooks out there, as you know, but how do you like the balance of creating something that's really tasty and appetizing and kind of attractive looking, and then, but not making it so complicated that people are like, forget this, let me just order in. So like, how did you think about it when you put this book together? Yeah,
I think for me, the biggest thing again was through all the diets that I had done, they were either boring. And so I knew I didn't want to do the typical, brown rice, boiled chicken and broccoli, because that led to me kind of falling off, because I was always chasing excitement.
Yeah.
And so for me, the biggest thing was finding ways to incorporate flavor and simple ways to doing, to what I'm eating, in order to be able to kind of be excited about it, be mentally stimulated, and look forward to eating. And so, I achieved that through the spices, through the herbs. I also have a full chapter of sauces, because that's really what helps elevate really any dish. And so as long as you've got different flavors and textures going on and colors in your meal, because we also eat with our eyes. And so for me, the biggest thing was taking time to really plate things instead of just standing up, putting something together and eating at the kitchen counter. For me, actually taking the time to plate it up in a beautiful way really made a difference.
Arash, I just have to tell you, if Tim was here in studio, this is when he usually breaks out his sandwich, right?
Yeah.
Or it would have been it would have been probably the break beforehand, Tim.
Yeah, don't worry, I got my banana and my carrots right here. They're right here.
It's usually though a full-on sandwich, but anyway.
Yeah, I would. Hey, I do want to ask you, I'm getting an urgent email from a colleague, Emily Griffeo. She anchored with me yesterday when Carol was out. I'm so jealous I missed Shred Happens by one day. OMG, I like his content a lot. I've made his recipes.
Oh, that's amazing.
It raises the question, though, about this. It's not a side hustle for you anymore. This is what you're doing now.
Yeah, it was in corporate finance and accounting.
So you said you scaled back on your lifestyle back in 2017 as a result of your health.
Yeah.
You made some adjustments to your lifestyle. Have you been able to offset and more the salary you earned in the corporate world by doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, I have. And I think, look, in the corporate world, obviously it's a salary. You don't have overhead. You don't have expenses. You're not investing for the future. So, it took me a while when I initially set out. I was begging companies to send me, a free jar of peanut butter. And many of them wouldn't. It took me almost 2-3 years to monetize on the content that I was making. And I was in corporate finance before at a pretty large company, GE at the time. And so, when I left, it was a sizable gap in our income. We put our house on the market. I started renting my car out on Turo, an app. I started selling and flipping things on eBay. So I was trying to figure out how to make it work. For me at the beginning, it wasn't really about making money. It was really about changing my life. And a few years in, I was able to completely offset the income that I was making with my corporate job. Now, I did create a high protein, low carb pasta and rice company, Kaizen.
Yeah.
And so to develop that, that required a lot of capital. And so at some point I did have to go back to the corporate world to kind of fund the R&D of that. But yeah, it was tough, but now I've been able to completely offset it.
Just got about 30 seconds. So what's your focus, to build out Kaizen, or what's your next step?
Yeah, I think, continue to share content. Nothing makes me prouder than seeing families around the world enjoy my meals and make my recipes. And with Kaizen, we're able to deliver people a high protein, low carb pasta. So we're going to continue on that trend and hopefully allow people to eat a healthier version of their favorite meal without the calories, without the carbs, with much more protein.
I'm starving. If you were cooking for Tim and me, what would you cook tonight?
The Middle Eastern chicken and rice bowl, no question.
All right, deal. Would we get dessert too?
Absolutely.
I see you've got
there's
desserts.
A whipped Greek yogurt and berries. It's delicious.
Oh my God, I'm starving. Good luck. Stay in
Thank you so
touch.
much.
Love to hear how things are going.
Thanks, Carol.
Arash Hashemi, creator and co-founder of Kaizen Food Company, and of course his new book, Shred Happens, So Easy, So Good. 100+ protein-packed Mediterranean favorites with a low-carb twist. Good luck. All right, you're listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. This is Bloomberg.
BMW is selling $4 billion of U.S. high-grade bonds as investment-grade firms seized on the relative market calm to raise fresh debt ahead of the Fed's decision. That comes tomorrow. We got Christian Hoffmann with us. He's head of fixed income and a portfolio manager at Thornburg Investment Management. Christian, good to have you join us. Let's take a step back, big picture, and talk a little bit about fixed income. Our drive to the close guest earlier basically saying, hey, I'm going to stay away from fixed income right now. Rates are really where they're supposed to be. Are you surprised to hear that as somebody who focuses directly on fixed income? That was Scott Ladner, by the way, over at Horizon Investments.
Look, I don't think you need to load the boat on duration today. I agree with that, but I think there's a clear case for fixed income. You're able to get 5 to 6% returns without taking a ton of risk. And you see some sell-side strategists forecasting kind of 0 to 3% stock market returns in the U.S. over the next decade. So that looks pretty interesting, in comparison to those forecasts. I would also say that fixed income's ability to add ballast and income in your portfolio, is notably different than we saw over the past 15 years when we were living, in a zero interest rate world. So, we've certainly moved from, when we were close to 480 on the 10-year. But it doesn't mean the value proposition is gone or there's not a clear case for fixed income today, especially relative to the past.
So you're talking U.S. debt you would find, or is it corporates or some other part of the fixed income world? We talked about munis, I think it was last week, and that they've definitely been under pressure. But is it other parts of the fixed income world that you're finding better opportunities, or where are the best opportunities?
Yeah, so we have a global relative value framework here at Thornburg. So we find opportunities really in structured product and the corporate side, from high quality to low quality. I would say munis, to your point, have actually become more interesting in recent weeks. I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is that at this time of year, you do see some seasonality where people are pulling money from that market to pay tax, pay for tax needs. You also tend to see the flows there dominated by retail. And those sometimes do not, track one for one versus core rates, which tend to have a more institutional driver for the flows there. So you've seen some of those ratios widen out, and it's actually, it's a relatively more attractive entry point relative to even a few weeks ago. So it's really all the above to your question.
Christian, how do you think the economy is doing right now?
I think it's doing notably worse than a few weeks ago or a few months ago. And that's really driven by uncertainty. So we see just a tremendous amount of, what I would call tape bombs in terms of tariff announcements, retractments, and that really makes people pause and pull back if they don't know, what they should do or what the world is going to look like tomorrow. And that pause creates its own mechanism where that inaction leads to a slowdown. So I think that will continue, and it kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where the inaction, again, makes people less willing to take risk. It makes them less willing to drive investment and really sit on the sidelines until they figure things out. That's in the real economy, but you also see it, from someone modeling out, right? It's hard enough to model out the future as it is, particularly if you don't know if the drivers are changing, on a minute-to-minute basis.
It's interesting to hear that because in one sense, we do get that and the uncertainty from companies, but then in another sense, we get, a $32 billion acquisition from Google, its biggest ever, buying this cybersecurity firm Wiz. That was in the deal that was happening for 10 months, as far as we know. But help me make sense of that, like a big deal like that, but also the uncertainty out there.
I mean, I think there are winners and losers, and I think that is a drop in the bucket, for Google. You've heard about a, K-shaped recovery, and, certainly, there are folks that have hard assets with, low coupon debt that's locked in. Those folks have a lot more ballast and are in a better position than, folks living from paycheck to paycheck and dealing with a softening job market, and a lot more uncertainty out there. So it's not that everyone is necessarily cautious. It kind of depends on your starting point, and also, again, I think the levers that you can pull to deal with this uncertainty. And Google, I would say, is in a very attractive position relative to all those points.
Christian, do you feel like, though, there's a growing bunch of data points, and we'll see what kind of data points we get from the Fed tomorrow, certainly with the dot plot and what it has to say in terms of growth for the U.S. economy, as well as expectations around Fed moves. Having said that, Torsten Slok over at Apollo is sharing with me some additional B of A research that's out there, and what they found is small business uncertainty is on the rise in the midst of increasing volatile market and policy conditions. In response, according to B of A aggregated credit and debit card data, small businesses are slowing their card spending across the board. It just feels like we keep getting data point after data point. Sentiment, as you said, can lead to actions where people rein things in and slow stuff down. But I mean, are you thinking more and more about the possibility of a recession, and is that shaping how you think investors should invest right now?
So I would say two things to that. One is that, 3 months ago, if you said you were betting on a recession, people would look at you like you're crazy. There's always some potential that you hit a bump in the road. And we haven't been betting on a recession, to be clear, but even more important than that, it's about looking what is priced into the market. And if you looked at high yield spreads flirting with the 260s and the S&P 500 trading around 22, 23 times, that didn't leave a lot of room for error, even in a very good world. And so when you do hit these bumps in the road and when the worldview becomes more muddled, you see valuations react very quickly. And that's what we've seen in the previous couple weeks. That volatility does create some opportunities. That said, I wouldn't say that broadly risk is screaming cheap today, but it's much easier to imagine what a potential slowdown might look like and feel like, just given some of those data points that you mentioned and where we are in the economic cycle.
And you, like most folks, since we don't really expect the Fed to do anything, are eager for the dot plot, the summary of also the summary of economic projections from the Fed. I mean, what are you going to be looking out for specifically?
Honestly, I'm not too excited about this Fed meeting. Some are more exciting than others. There's going to be a lot of tap dancing about, what does all this mean? And I think Powell, similar to his speech 2 weeks ago, is going to kind of say, hey, we're in wait and see mode. There's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, which we've been talking about. And, it's hard for us to make decisions given that we don't know what the actual drivers of, these policy changes might look like. The dot plots are likely to suggest probably slightly worse inflation and probably slightly worse growth as well. So they're going to trend slightly more stagflationary. But I think you're also going to see Chair Powell step back and say, hey, don't read, too much into this. There's a lot of uncertainty right now and we're trying to make sense of it, just like you are.
What's one question you'd ask Powell, just 30 seconds, if you had a chance tomorrow in the press conference?
My colleague Matt Burdett saw Powell at LaGuardia Airport 2 weeks ago, and he respected his privacy, which I absolutely would not have done.
I love that.
I would have accosted him. I would probably ask him, what he would really like to tell the president, off the record behind closed doors.
You sure you wouldn't have asked him what his favorite Dead song is? You sure you wouldn't have done that?
Could ask, favorite concert, but that'll probably come out in a minute. So we can wait for that.
That's true, and you might more likely though have gotten an answer to that question than the other one. Christian, thanks so much. Be well. Christian Hoffmann, head of fixed income over at Thornburg Investment Management, roughly $47 billion in assets under management. So, no doubt about watching what the Fed chair may say tomorrow at that press conference.